welcome to Pickup Game with Seth Greenberg. And before we get going, we have used this platform the last 6 weeks to kind of celebrate the game of basketball and use it as kind of a diversion from the pandemic and just to bring coaches together and to talk ball. But things are much different, obviously, in the last 2 weeks in terms of what's happened in our world and in America. And our thoughts, our prayers go out to George Floyd and to anyone and everyone who's been impacted by social and racial injustice. What's going on in the world is disheartening. It's disturbing. When I see what's happened with these rogue police officers and law enforcement people and how they've been so divisive, it breaks my heart. And, there's a standard we all need to live by. And that standard needs to be upheld across the board, and justice needs to be served. But more importantly, I think the most important thing that I would like to do is try to create some type of conversations and try to find a way to bring people together and be educated. I did something last week with about 40 of my former players. It was an incredible experience. But today, Coach Cuonzo Martin, the head coach at Missouri, and Mike Brown, the associate head coach of the Golden State Warriors, I appreciate you guys being here to help me and maybe help others so that we can find a way to put good days on top of each other and create a better world, a better us, a better community, and find some answers. So I appreciate you guys being here. And I guess the first thing I'd just ask both of you is through the lens of your life's experiences, where are we now and where do we need to move forward, and maybe just an idea of how we need to go about changing the world in which we live in one day at a time?
Oh, you can go ahead, Mike.
You know what? Just watching the young people out there, watching how passionate they are during the protests, how committed they are during the protests. It seems different. Obviously, there's been racism for centuries, and I think that's going to continue. But what you're hoping for is to continue with change. You'd love to have drastic change to try to get to a point where everybody does look through the lens and they don't see color. But is that ever going to happen? I don't know. But watching the protests, watching how diverse the group is, watching how passionate they are, it gives you hope to where this is just not something that's cliche or in the moment. This looks like there hasn't a chance or an opportunity to be long lasting. I had a good friend of mine tell me that, and the friends about my age and they're white, and they told me that, when they were growing up, they obviously, like most white people in their households, heard something that might have been racially sensitive come from their parents, and they imagine that when their parents were younger and growing up, they probably heard a little bit more from their parents, and now with today's generation, the guy that's my buddy that's my age, he said, obviously it's less now that their kids hear than what they heard, and so on and so forth. And so, you hope that generations upon generations can eventually get this right. And I love the young group that's out there now, the passion that they're displaying, the message that they're promoting, and the diversity of the group. And that's what gives me a lot of hope today.
Well, I think for me, it's I think this is a country of great wealth and great opportunities. But I think the thing that hit me hard, growing up in East St. Louis, we had a Zoom call, and my mom was actually on the call, and she said the hardest thing when someone says sorry, and she said sorry can't bring my son back. And that's a hard thing to grasp and to deal with. And my mom, we've never talked in depth like that. And I think the biggest thing that we have to do in order to continue to make progress, because you don't want to shortchange. Do we have ways to go? Yes, but you don't want to shortchange the work that Martin Luther King and his team did. all the work that Barack Obama, this team, then there have been many other people along the way to make progress. Now we stand in here and we have to continue to push this forward. And I say this, and I say this with respect. And I think what happens with the COVID virus, if there's a plus in this virus, it allowed time to stop, so to speak. So now we can see it, because normally when something like this happens, there's a sporting event the next day. 2 days later, there's a sporting event. I have to get back to my job. Well, there's nowhere to go, and we have to face this, and we have to be strong in it. But I don't think we can make the level of progress we need to make if we don't have an open heart, because everybody, I hear a lot of people say we have to educate. There are a lot of educated, very successful people that have a cold, mean heart. So if you don't have a good heart, we can't make the progress we need to make.
Yeah, not like within, you guys are in two different worlds, but in the same world in terms of, Coach Brian, you're in the NBA. What are the best ways, like the Warriors are using their voice to impact day-to-day life and make a difference? And then Coach Martin, like, whether it's within the college community, whether it's other coaches, whether it's, on your campus, within your conference, institutionally, what things are going on? Where are the Warriors now in terms of what are they trying to do? And I always say you got to put good days on top of each other, no matter what you're doing.
Right.
What type of things are going on in the NBA with the Warriors across the board to put good days on top of each other?
Well, what you like to see is, our players, all of our players have stepped up and tried to contribute in one way, shape, or form, whether it's via a statement or it's an action plan. Steph and Clay were out protesting Oakland a couple of days ago, leading that charge. Juan Toscano, he was a G League player for us. He just got elevated to our 15-man roster team, and he's leading stuff within his community too. And so to see our players step up and not only tweet something or say something, but actually get out and get their hands dirty and lead groups of people, and while doing that, give messages. It's, in my opinion, it's all positive, because at the end of the day, they're all role models, and a lot of people look up to them. And it's no different for our organization. The thing that that I like about our organization is, yes, I do agree you have to have an open heart. I agree with Coach Martin, but the one thing is there are people that don't know or that don't understand, and so the fact that our organization has stepped up, not only making a strong statement about their stance on it, but doing something within the organization, educating people within the organization by bringing speakers in and having forums and committees and so on put together, is a positive. And then their outreach beyond that, in terms of donating stuff or getting us as coaches and players involved in the community, in my opinion, is second to none.
Well, I think what we've done, we've had Zoom calls with our players twice a week, and we had our chief of police here in Columbia. He was on the Zoom call with us. He was very candid. It was real. Some things that you don't want to hear is tough to hear, but you have to deal with. And I thought he did a tremendous job of just really helping us understand this is a tough thing that we're all dealing with. I'm doing everything in my power to make it right. But I think the other things that we have to do, it has to be the athletics, the campus, and the community. I think we all have to get involved, because oftentimes you have a university and just 2 or 3 blocks away, it's a different world. We have to bring those things closer, because there are a lot of people in the community that have a lot of wisdom, can give you a pulse on the situations in life. So I think for our guys, I've been a part of protests. They've been a part of protests. But like I said to those guys, it has to be more. You have to be willing to give more, to do more, and be more. And that's a tough thing. And I say to them, the road will get bumpy, but you have to stand strong.
You talk about the road to get bumpy, getting people involved, and all different types of people involved. There have been coaches that have stood up and made strong statements, that have gotten involved. There have been coaches that have been maybe more reserved and cautious and careful. I'm not sure I'm using the right words, but like Coach Martin, do you think there's been a failing of at the collegiate level, at least, some of the prominent white coaches that have not stood up, being that they've made their living basically through the play of a lot of African American young players.
Well, I like to think first and foremost, if they haven't spoken out publicly, they've done things behind the scenes, and that they haven't. I think because whatever race or nationality you are, you have a right to do what you need to do because we're actually fighting human rights. So they have that right to or not to. But here's the key: if they have players of color, and oftentimes those guys like myself coming from inner city backgrounds, not all rough backgrounds, and if a coach hadn't spoken out, then I blame the player. Because as a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, hey, coach, did you see the news? So if a coach hadn't spoken out, that tells me everything I need to know. So I don't blame the coach because he has that right, but I blame the prospect, I blame that team, and I blame the parents, and I also blame the people that were part of his life to go to that university because they trusted in that coach to do right by that young man. So I think that is the most important thing. You can't get mad at a guy for doing something he doesn't want to do because that's his right. But the onus comes down to the players, and the players have to understand the amount of authority and respect that they have because those guys out there performing all the time. So I think they have to do it. So each player and prospect, each assistant coach, if that head coach hadn't spoken out, then that says something about their program. So if I'm a prospect and I'm watching this, I have to take that into account. I have to ask that question. Coach, were you too busy? Because nobody's too busy. There's nothing going on. So again, I can't be mad at the guy for not doing it, but I think the ownership comes on the prospect. So if the players allow that to happen, that's a bigger issue.
Coach Martin, go ahead, please.
I'd like to add to that. I think, I agree with what Coach Martin said, but it is important too for guys that have a voice to speak up and use it. I think two of our most prominent white coaches in the NBA, Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich, I work for them both, and their voices are probably the strongest, coming from our coaches association. And when you have guys like that step up, not only on a national scale, but even within, they both do stuff. Like I said, I work from both. They both do stuff even before the George Floyd killing. They've done stuff with their teams for years to bring about racial awareness or racism, especially within, whether it's bringing speakers in or addressing whatever current event or topic is going on. They're both very forward thinking in that regard and respect everybody, no matter what color they are or religion or anything like that. They try to bring everybody together to understand one another on a daily basis, which is something that, it takes a lot of courage to do that. Those two guys obviously have shown that they have it, but it's important that you have those types of leaders, especially white coaches that have the success that they've had, step up to the plate like that because it makes it easier for everybody else.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point. Do you think some guys were just apprehensive because they didn't want to get the pushback? Well, how do you understand? I'm always a big believer. You love your players. I mean, and if you love your players know you love them, and that you care about them, and that you're compassionate about them, and that you stand beside them. There were some things that transpired that were a little shocking. What about within athletic departments or within organizations? Like Coach Martin, within athletic departments, we've got to create some type of greater diversity to give our student athletes a better understanding of different options and other voices to hear. Where are you on that?
I've always been adamant about, student athletes, internships. I think that's very important. When I was out in California, I really understood the importance of internships. I think you have to give them opportunities. Every coach has to make time. Every athlete has to have an opportunity to intern. I think the other part, we have to have jobs and opportunities for our athletes because they generate a lot of wealth for universities. And oftentimes you see minority athletes don't have the jobs and opportunities after college. So what I've challenged, and I'll say this to every university around right now that's listening, for all you athletes, especially men's basketball and football, when you have minority athletes within a 50-mile radius of your campus, how many right now, you can go back 30 or 40 years, how many right now have successful businesses or in position to make hiring decisions, whether it's CEO, CFO, they're in those positions, at least, it should be at least 10, it should be more, but within a 50-mile radius of their campus, how many successful minority former football, men's basketball players in those communities that can create opportunity for you? Because what happens when you're done playing You graduated 2.5, 2.6, 2.7. Well, I'm not beating the competition with their resume. So if I don't have an opportunity intern, how can I get the job? Because getting the degree is just not enough. So I think our administrative team have to do a great job of putting our student athletes in position to be successful, to get jobs and have great careers down the road.
You know, Coach Warren, you explained that, but the NBA, Coach Brown, is getting younger and younger and younger and younger. And I always say it's a very exclusive club. I mean, it looks easy. You know, going from high school to college looks easy. Going from college to the NBA looks easy when you're watching it on TV. Right. And then you get there and you realize, you know, this stuff is hard. So, right. Like, when you get guys that are coming through the NBA, are there things going on because the league is so young and some guys' opportunities in the league are very short? You know, they're talking about the NBA Academy and all those things, which actually doesn't put an emphasis on education because it puts an emphasis on destination. But are there things going on in the NBA to help mentor these young players, not generally just as players, but to help them be successful 10 years down the road?
Yeah, the NBA has a lot of programs that they utilize mainly when players first come in the league. There's the rookie transition period, the courses that they got to go through. There are people in the league office that stay in touch with the players. Every organization has a player development guy. And you know, you think when you hear the word player development, you think just on the floor development. But we actually have a full-time, and I think his title is called player development guy, that travels with us, and he interacts with players mainly on off the court issues. And so there are things that players can grasp onto. I think now, especially with the way that George Floyd's killing brought racism to light, I think there are going to be more programs instituted on an organizational or team by team basis. You know, when I was coming up as a young assistant, and even now today, you know, you always have one assistant has 2 to 3 guys maybe that he works closely with. And, you know, as a head coach, you rely a lot on that assistant, not only to help them get better in the game of basketball, but also educate them in life. And, you know, for instance, when I was in San Antonio, one of my guys was Steven Jackson. And, you know, he used to come out and hang with us at my house and interact with me and my kids and see how we operate as a family unit. And, you know, when I got to Indiana, there was a young Jermaine O'Neal, Jamal Tinsley, Al Harrington. And so a lot of times those personal relationships as an assistant coach are what the head coach relies on most often to help, you know, bring the young man up from a young adult to an adult. And I think now going forward, there are going to be a lot more programs instituted on the NBA level, similar to college, to help these guys grow.
Coach Martin, like, you've had these Zoom calls with your guys. They have to be pretty raw. I mean, like, you know, again, the lens that they're looking at the world. What have you gotten out of it? What have they gotten out of it? What is the perspective and the sharing of thoughts in those conversations? Because these conversations are imperative, and it's not a one conversation. I love that you're doing it multiple times a week, because it's not a one-time conversation that we all need to have. This is something that needs to be ongoing. It can't be something, all right, now we've gotten that, put a Band-Aid on that, now we're moving forward. So what type of things can you do as a head coach, and can other head coaches do, or anyone in any organization do, moving forward, to keep the conversation moving forward and to continue to listening and hearing and helping?
Well, we've always had what we call real talk sessions, and those sessions are pretty much everything you can think of. So when this happened, this wasn't as if we had to gather the troops and say, okay, let's talk about this. We've had these talks before, unfortunately. So they understand that part. But the biggest thing, what made me understand in dealing with all this, making sure your guys are registered to vote. And we did that with our guys about a week ago, to register to vote. That's very important. The other thing is it's the opportunities, the jobs and the opportunities. So now, I'll go back a little bit from an administrative standpoint. I think at universities, we have to do a great job. Even if you have somebody on your campus that's solely hired in sports, just in sports, to move jobs when they're done playing. I think that part is very important because you have to be educated, one, but also have to be prepared to get these jobs and these opportunities. And then the other thing, like I tell our guys, you have to get into the community. Understand the judicial system. Unfortunately, we've had guys that I've been a part of it as coaches that had family members that spent time in prison, sometimes wrongfully accused. I've had a brother that spent time in prison, so I've seen how these things work, and I talked to him. I went through his paperwork, and some of that stuff is hard to see and believe. And then the way it turns out, you just have to deal with it. And the harsh part about it, like I said to our players, guys, can you imagine a young man being sentenced, and he's totally innocent? In this case, he's totally innocent. But he's sitting there, doesn't have the resources, the financial resource, or the mental capacity to understand to fight for himself. But he has someone that represents him, and they say, well, you can either do these 10 years, but if you fight it, you're looking at life. When you know you're innocent, that's a lonely place to feel hopeless. When you know you're innocent, but you'd rather do these 10 years as opposed to spending life in prison. When you're innocent, now all of a sudden, there's anger, there's hate, there's resentment. So what I tell our players, you have to be a part of the change. Educate yourself, understanding who you're voting for in your community. And for me, I voted a certain way, but it really helped me understand the importance of the people in positions to make decisions.
That's incredible. What about, like, what type of action plans, say on a college campus, Coach Martin, or what type of action plans in the community? Because I know the Warriors are such a big part of the community. What type of action plans can take place on a college campus where you have, 30,000 or whatever so people that can, one person at a time in a lot of ways. What type of things will you guys be planning, and will the institution be planning moving forward? Because everything right now this is where we are in this moment in time. We have to move forward. One thing is bringing attention. After attention, there's got to be some type of action plan. We do it. If someone guards the ball screen a certain way, we have an action plan.
Yes.
What's going to be our action plan moving forward?
I think for me, and Jim Sturks is our AD here, and I think he's a wonderful man. I think he does a tremendous job. He's willing to continue to learn and grow in these situations, whatever it takes to help. But I think that the entities in which I think we should operate, one, we have to spend more time with our teachers. I mean, our elementary teachers all the way to the high school level. We have to really pour into them, give them resources, especially when you have a campus so close within the community. Give them all the resources to be successful, because they touch so many lives, and that's where it starts with our youth. Those teachers impact. So I remember everything one of my teachers said. I remember the face of each one of them, how they impact my life. And they gave me energy, they gave me courage, they gave me faith, they gave me strength, they gave me confidence. And I think the other part, and this is hard for some people, but you have to grasp this. We have to do everything in our power with our law enforcement, our police team, our administrative team. When it comes to policing, we have to support them in the right way, but we also have to hold them accountable, because I think that is probably one of the toughest jobs. And I, in my opinion, have to have the mentality of a Navy SEAL, but also the precision and intellect of a scholar when they're making sound, quick decisions. And that's easier said than done for me, because I'm not in that position. But that is a high-level position, and you have to have the best in the world and operate in that position. And I think the other part is our fellowships, our worship, our churches, and our ministries. We have to have them strong, because all of these entities make up the community. And we have to do a great job of supporting them, and they have to do a great job of supporting us. And everybody has to come on the same team. That's why I said, campus, community, all these are very important. Then you gain wisdom in going through things. But if we don't do this and we don't support these communities, then we'll be right back where we started 20 years from now.
Coach Brown, you've had a chance to listen to or participate with the NBA's Committee on Racial Injustice. What was your kind of one main takeaway from that committee?
I think what you're saying is what we all felt. When we initially talked about doing something, the idea of putting out a statement came up, and everybody to Coach on that call said, "Hey, look, we're tired of statements. We need to take action more than anything else." And so the call was a lot to do about what can we do within our communities, and then as a whole nationally, to start actions to try to thwart racism out there. And I agree with what Coach Martin says. It comes down to educating. You want to educate people that don't understand. There was that story out there about the Southwest flight attendant. She sat down next to a white man on one of her flights, and they got to talking, and he was asking her questions about racism and so on and so forth. And her, as an African American flight attendant, she was giving her opinion, and then he expressed his opinion. And lo and behold, it was the CEO of American Airlines that she was talking to. But just those two people sitting down, talking to one another, educating each other, took their level of awareness, which is what everybody needs to have, to another level. I like what Coach Few up in Gonzaga is going to do when it comes time to vote. Hey, nothing's going on that day. No practice, anything like that, to try to encourage guys to understand and educate themselves on who's running for office and to go vote. Ferguson just elected the city's first black mayor, and that's where Michael Brown got shot. And the neat part about it is Mayor Ella Jones, who's the new mayor of Ferguson, Missouri. Her biggest platform is supporting the hiring of qualified police officers like Coach Martin's talking about. And then, on top of that, trying to figure out how you can affect policy change. There's so many policies that need to be changed out there that, as an NBA Coaches Association, there are specific ones that we're going to attack. We haven't finalized what we're going to do yet, but Stan Van Gundy, he's a part of the Players Coalition, and there are 5 things that they're trying to go after when it comes to policy change regarding police. And there are a lot of the things that I didn't even know. They like, for instance, they want to get a civilian oversight department or committee that will oversee all departments instead of having police officers policing other police officers. So there are a lot of things that can be had out there. It's just a matter of going out and doing them.
Let's pivot a little bit. We've got the social unrest and the opportunity for change. We're dealing with, obviously, the coronavirus. Coach Brown, you're dealing with your practice facilities are open and potentially, the plans to move forward for the season. And Coach Martin, you guys have your guys back on campus. So I'll start with Coach Martin. How important is it just to have your guys back on campus and the pressure it takes off their families at home? And what's your plan moving forward now that you have them, where you can see them and touch them and be with them?
Well, we were allowed to get the guys back. We were able to start June 8th. And what I mean by start, we're not allowed to do anything on the basketball court. We were allowed to have 4 guys in the weight room along with the strength coach, so a total of 5 guys. So if I wanted to go in, I'd have to watch from the outside. So a total of 5 guys in the weight room. We can't do anything on the court. So now you rotate those guys between men's and women's basketball, and you rotate them in, and it's all voluntary. So that means if a player doesn't want to lift, he or she does not have to lift. Now, what we've done in this first week, we did testing, so we were allowed to work out on the 8th. We did testing the previous Friday and Saturday. So we were planning on taking this week off anyway, just to allow the guys to get a peace of mind coming back, because this is a different time for these guys who've been playing for so long, and all of a sudden there's a pit stop for about 3 months. So really just allow the guys to have a peace of mind if they need to see the sports psychologist, anybody they need to see and talk to be able to do that. And then possibly we'll get started on the 15th. But right now, my main concern is their well-being and their health.
Coach Brown, you guys, your facilities are open. What's the next stage for where you guys are in terms of getting back to preparing? Are you guys even bringing your guys back completely?
No. So as we all know, the NBA is only taking the top 22 teams down to Orlando. So our season is effectively over. Having said that, Steve's mindset is 9 months from when the season ended, which is beginning of March for us, until the possibility of next season beginning end of November, beginning of December. It's about an 8 to 9 month period. And, we feel that 9 months is a long time for anybody, especially at our level, to stay away from the game. And so Even though we're not going down to Orlando, we're hoping to have a training camp, maybe a joint training camp at some point in time with one of the other teams that aren't down in Orlando, maybe the end of July, beginning of August. But that's something that needs to be approved and by the NBA, and all the pieces have to fit in order for it to happen. Right now, all of our guys, they can come back if they want to. It's all voluntary. And when they do come in, we can only have 4 guys come in at a time. Each guy has to have his own basket. Each guy can only have one coach working with him. And then from there, they can work. I think the time limit is an hour and a half if they want to on the court. And then from there, if they want to, they can go into the weight room to work with our strength coaches, again, one at a time. And then once those 4 players leave, they disinfect all the balls, the hoops, everything in the weight room. And then a couple hours after that, another 4 guys come in. And we had to give a list of 6 guys to the NBA that are going to be allowed to work with those guys, because they did not want any head coaches nor any coaches that sit on the front of the bench to work individually with guys at this point in time.
Coach Martin, your guys' situation now coming back. Well, actually, Coach Brown, let me ask you one thing, because this is kind of piggybacks on it a little bit. So that's where you guys are. Yet you also have to get ready for a draft. So how does an NBA team, with everything that's going on in the world, get ready for an NBA draft? And then, Coach Martin, if you have, I don't know if you have guys that are still testing the waters. As a college coach, how do you balance that? And how do you move forward? So, what are you guys doing, Coach Brown, to prepare for the draft with during the course of this pandemic?
Listen, I'm not as heavily involved as Steve is, Steve Kerr, head coach. But what the front office has done, they've sent me game film on our top prospects where they think we'll land, in the lottery. And so I'm watching those, and I'll give my input at the appropriate time. But everybody in our front office is extremely active. They're all not only watching film, but they schedule Zoom meetings individually with a lot of these prospects. And then they still have to continue to do background checks. So they're doing everything like they would normally be doing during draft time. The only thing, obviously, is the Chicago pre-draft camp, and then having players come in and sitting down with them face to face. Those things are obviously eliminated. But beyond that, our front office, they've been active. They meet probably every day via Zoom, and they try to continue to hash it out, because it's going to be an interesting draft for us.
Coach, the NCAA has come out with their timeline for players staying or coming back to school, and some people have been critical, which I found a little bit of a problem with. Where do you stand with where we're at right now? I mean, some people think the kids should be up to actually enroll on campus, and then if they decide to stay in the draft, move forward. Where are you guys at with that? I know you're involved with a bunch of committees.
Well, I think the biggest thing, I think a young man should have the opportunity, especially in this time. So this is a little bit different. This is not a normal year, but I think they should give the young man time to make a sound decision. But I think for those that don't plan on doing, get back to school, get prepared, be a part of your team. But I think you allow them the time necessary to do what they need to do. But for me, with our players, we had 3 guys that talked about it. I think they all plan on coming back to school. And for me, it was just giving them space, because my whole thing, what I've learned through all of this, outside of the basketball piece, is the interns, the opportunities to create jobs, to understanding who you are as a young man. This is a valuable time. We buy all these Fortune 500 books, these magazines for our guys within the offense to study, because like I said, those guys, what's stopping you from becoming the next millionaire, the next billionaire, to be successful? So we spend more time than any, because we can't be on the floor, talking about life situations, becoming a successful CEO of a company one day, because you can do that. And like I say to our guys, the NBA is a beautiful dream, but what's wrong with dreaming to be the owner of the team? So you have to dream big, you have to believe you can be that. So for our guys that plan on doing, I think they all truly plan on coming back. So I think the paperwork came in for some of those guys this past week. So I like to think they'll do what's best. And they've been playing with each other. They're excited about it. So we'll see.
I guess the last thing I'd ask you guys, like, all right, we're living in the moment. What is your vision now, this week and a month from now, from where we can move as a society on a daily basis? I mean, like, we brought tremendous attention to the racial injustice and the systemic injustices of society. That's a starting point. Where are we going to be a month from now, 2 months from now? And what do you think just needs to happen? And I know you talked about it starting in the community, which I 100% believe, and whether the community is, your dining room table to the people that you've lived with, to people that have touched your life, to, for me, without a team now, my former players who can then go into their communities. But what else can we do to continue to move the message forward, I guess, is I'm asking both of you.
I can answer it. There's a couple of things I had written down because I think it's important. First, we have to find equality-driven people in elected positions. And I think that is the very, very first thing. Then I think when you're talking in terms of college campuses, businesses, companies, how is your board of directors? How is your committees? How are they? Is there a level of diversity across the board? I think to go into the office on Monday, whatever day it is, and look at the diversity across the board. Because when you look at the person to the left and to the right, there has to be a level of diversity, or you have to start from scratch. Not to say the other persons aren't qualified, but you have to start from scratch. Now, I think the other thing, when you deal with athletics, I think it's very important, and I'm talking from the standpoint of minority athletes. They work so hard, 4 years of college, they work extremely hard. And this is for all athletes. I'll say this. Every year I should be allowed to get 3 credit hours for that sport. So when I leave, at least 15 credit hours in that sport, because I'm taking a class as we speak. And I also think for athletes, in 4 years, I should at least be able to have a teaching certificate. I shouldn't have to go to a class, or when I'm done playing, to go back and get a teaching certificate for a year and a half. I should be able to have a teaching certificate because of my 4+ years. So now I can transition right into the school system to help educate young men and women, but also the opportunity to get 3+ credit hours every semester. I mean, yes. And then the other thing, I think from an administrative standpoint, I said this before, we have to have somebody solely in position, your total job, whether it's in football, men's and women's basketball, to create jobs and opportunity. You have to find that job. I'm not interviewing for the job. There's the job. I've done the work for 4+ years, or allow me at least a year to intern. So something has to give there, because we can't ask them to do one thing and not willing to do the other.
It's a great point. Coach Brown?
Yeah, Seth, I agree with what Coach Martin said. I think in the near future, what we're going to see resulting from what's going on now is a world, hopefully, that is more empathetic, one that is more aware, one that communicates more openly and honestly with one another. And at the end of the day, when you have those 3 things, that will lead to more opportunities. It will open up more opportunities for people of color, and fair opportunities for people of color. And I think that is the beginning point or starting point for racial equality going forward.
Well, I really appreciate you guys coming on and sharing your knowledge, your experiences. My thing is simple. We've got to have some type of humanity. We've got to have some type of compassion. We've got to care about each other more, love each other more, be open to conversation, listening and hearing. And, I've gotten to the point where it's disheartening. And I have 2 former players, Eric Brown, who's from Bedford-Stuyvesant Boys and Girls High School, and Keith Armstrong, who's actually a Detroit kid who played for me at Pitt, one played for me at Miami, are both police officers. And one of my college roommates is a guy named Lance Williams, who's DEA, and I beat him up 2 weekends ago because there were things I had a hard time understanding, and they were very, very honest with me. I mean, they were honest. He said, "Coach, there's good and bad in every walk of life." He said, "There are good coaches, bad coaches, good, teachers, good lawyers, good doctors. The problem is when you have a bad person in law enforcement, it absolutely is criminal, and it just tears down anyone and everyone. And you know, their biggest thing was, and for what it's worth, is, I think Coach Martin, you mentioned it, is the hiring process. Is the hiring process is, he said, it's too simple, and you've got to find out the real essence of what a person is, what's in their heart, because you know, a person that is to protect and serve, the thing in their heart should be to make a difference, to care, to love, to protect. And they said that is, in their minds, that was the biggest thing that had to change in law enforcement moving forward. But your guys' insight was incredible and appreciated. And you know how much I know everyone's pulling at everyone right now to get a little bit of piece of them, to get their insight, to get their perspective. And I thank you for spending some time and getting out a message that we are a better society if we do it together, and we care and we love, and we have a semblance of humanity and compassion. And hopefully these conversations will continue and hopefully have some type of impact on the world and society that we live in. I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you.
No, thanks for having us on, Seth.
I appreciate it.
Great to see you, Mike.
You too, Connie.